So, welcome to Earthly Show and Tell. Today, I have Eric and Jordan. Why don't you introduce yourselves? How about start with you, Eric?
Hi, I'm Eric. I started Slipwise with my co-founder, Steven, 10 months ago or so. And we've been building out an operating system for marinas to handle their operations, to deal with the boats that are coming and going and their contracts and documents. I'm a Ruby enthusiast. Um, we could dig into that. So it's a Ruby application as much as possible. And then bringing in dependencies, which makes sense for all the different challenges. So Rails to interact with the web, and in Postgres for the database. And already with that level of complexity, I was struggling to figure out how to deal with onboarding, because every development shop that I've ever been involved with, it was pretty challenging to spin up a new environment from scratch, or even harder from a completely different configuration, and try to get a working set that has anything to do with the production deployment. We happen to be using Heroku and Crunchy Bridge for our Postgres hosting. So just trying to get everything configured as consistently as possible between production and staging environments, hopefully review apps and developer machines and test environments. Really was looking for something. Started investigating Terraform right about the time that it went non-open source. Not that I was planning on learning how to use Terraform anyway, because of the hurdles involved. I'd already been exposed to it, but it was pretty painful. So I was looking for something else. And so I guess my searching led me to Earthly. And I started to look at the examples for Ruby and found them to be limited, shall we
Yeah.
say, and not really dealing with the complexities that I wanted to be able to deal with in Earthly, which was running reliable tests of our whole suite in a local developer environment, and in the cloud for CI as well, in an automated way, and not spend the exorbitant amount of time trying to figure out what is different and why it's passing in one place and not the other one. And then having correspondingly limited debugging abilities in those environments where things are failing, maybe even in random ways, and just like really not wanting to go down that road of non-deterministic tests again. And then also layering in the complexity of the browser and wanting to be able to iterate on the client in the automated testing scenarios and have them be running in independent places, so that I wasn't commingling the client, the ever increasing browser complexity with the system tests, but having an independent Docker container for each of these complexities felt like a really good idea as a way to make developer environments consistent, if nothing else.
Mm. And then, we'd met before, but before we started, you're like, we got to have Jordan here. So who's Jordan, and why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, yeah, sure. My name's Jordan. I am, I guess also, I don't know if I'm a Ruby enthusiast. I think I'm begrudgingly maybe admitting that it is the best tool for the job, and I've gotten, I guess, more acquainted than I would like with Rails over my career, because it is just so darn well suited for this business of web applications. But yeah, so I've been here since over the summer. Worked with Eric in a past life, and he brought me aboard to explore the space of marina operations management. Yeah, so
It's a cool problem you guys have. Like, well, it makes me think of like the water and boats and stuff. It's like, instead of, most businesses are like, we build a tool for somebody who builds a tool somebody who hosts a database. And you're like, no, there's like a boat and they have to pay, So,
Yeah.
I mean, why don't you like what did you come up with, Eric? Like what can you show us that you've done with Earthly? And like where was it a good fit? Where was it not? Show me what you got.
I would say that I worked and worked and worked on Earthly for now surely weeks of time in order to create this declarative description of the environment at a high level. What's happening in my Earth file, in our Earth file, is the description of the base. Most of the complexity is the Alpine image for Ruby, because I was looking for like a minimum place to begin. I wasn't sure that I'd be able to do everything I wanted to do with Alpine, but I thought that if I could, I would be best off using it, because it seemed to be like the kernel, just the minimum I need to do other things. In the past, I've used Debian and other things, and they all work, but I was just looking, because this was a greenfield application, I wanted to take advantage of that and make everything as simple and as humanly friendly as possible. So did that. And then, so here I have a few pipelines, which are used from GitHub Actions. So these represent the CI aspect of this file. And all CI is doing here is calling into other things, which are talk about in a minute. Here, I am, well, we'll talk about the actual thing. So the dependencies are all of these system level packages. Those all get installed. Then I deal with the gems, which are central for Ruby, where most of the dependencies come from. And then I have a build target that takes the dependencies and goes further, configuring the application secrets and precompiling the assets. And then the app itself, all it's doing is calling bundle exec rail server. And I'm using Docker Compose to handle all of the dependencies between the containers. So this is how I start up the server locally. Just here, it spins up all of the dependencies, and it's all you need to get a system running with your local version of all the data.
So that kind of speaks to what you were saying at the beginning, like somebody can come join your team and just start there.
So almost there's a README for bootstrapping the application, which installs some dependencies. Make sure you do some Earthly, like you guys require these things, the virtualization framework and Rosetta, configuring overcommit, some local host, setting up Earthly, joining the org, and then you're good to do a bootstrap, which will set up your local database. It basically spins up the Docker Compose Postgres, and then using the web container, which has all of the dependencies for the application, it runs this SQL script, which drops the database if it's present, and then creates a new one and runs the seeds file. And that's all you have to do. After that, you can do a start, and you have all of your data in your database, and you can start using the application locally. I would say the crown jewel of this file is this test, which is, it's not running in your local Docker context. It runs inside of the, I'm not sure what the exact terminology is, but inside of the build kit, so that anything, it doesn't depend at all on the state of your system at that point. So it's basically as deterministic as I've figured out how to make the tests.
This is where when you first started using Earthly, where I think I had a lot of interaction with you because you were pushing in this direction. I think like Docker in Docker, or like Docker in build kit and testing against it, maybe for as far as we've seen people go. So it's working well.
Yeah. So I felt I was on the edge because this I feel is really hard. This is why I feel like these concepts are challenging, because we're talking about multiple levels of containers inside of each other, which I didn't even know was possible before Earthly. But now, yes, these are very deterministic and more reliable than any tests I've ever worked with in the Ruby space. Once you involve a browser, tests, in my experience, Rails tests get like non-deterministic. It's just a fact in my experience. Like some of them will time out and this and that. But for me, and I'll let Jordan talk though.
In terms of just what it buys us, I mean, I've never had a CI configuration that I can run locally and have, full access to, debuggability and everything, and have confidence that it's the same thing on, in our CI workflows,
That's awesome. So something you guys said that I got confused about is the browser. Like, so I guess you have tests that are, well, tell me about the browser's
Sure.
involvement.
So if I look at the Docker Compose, you can see Chrome is a dependency of our tests. All of the system tests that we write, which is any test that uses a browser to interact with the application, as opposed to a deeper interaction, which would not require a browser. All of the tests that do use a browser use this Docker container for their browser. And we use Ferrum, which is the new API for, at least for Chrome browsers, that replaces something called Selenium, which was a disaster of an automation technology between code and browsers. This is
Why
much
was it a
better.
disaster? I think I used
It's
it before.
non-deterministic, in my opinion. In my experience, I should say. It was non-deterministic some percentage of the time, which leaves you with either flaky tests or arbitrarily retrying tests, which are not good options. And Ferrum has proven to be reliable.
Oh, that's
Unless
awesome.
something goes wrong, in which case it's totally broken and you have to reboot your whole computer or log out. We don't even know how to fix it. But excluding that problem, which is not a problem for CI, Ferrum has been exceedingly reliable. Sorry.
So you have some, I guess, like some high level tests that are clicking through and booking a boat into a slip or whatever.
Yep. Basically, more than 90% of our application is covered to some degree. So Ruby is very dynamic language where something could be one value now and completely different value in, just in 1 second, or even at the same time from a different perspective. So you need a lot of tests to have any confidence that your software works, I think. We have a pretty good comfort level for not releasing broken software.
I will say that in the past, there's a couple of technologies involved, that have been evolving over the last few years that have made it possible. But I've never been able in my career to put together a test suite that is so heavy on integrate, full end-to-end tests as we have here. Mostly because, like in the past, it's been very flaky and unreliable, just painful to manage these tests and to execute them. Obviously they're very like resource intensive, but this particular configuration and the sort of ergonomics that we get through Docker Compose and Earthly here have made it possible to, spin up business, and not have to get, hung up in a lot of, nitty gritty unit testing details, and be able to focus on the high level user experience first, and then go back and fill in the unit testing details as things solidify. And that
it sounds amazing. I've never been there, right? Like these high level tests they have a lot of value. They turn up a lot of stuff, but my experience has always been they're not dependable. So that's exciting. You guys found the holy grail, I guess.
I only have been creating system tests for like the vast majority of our software because it seems like a good place to begin. And eventually, as there's branching, it makes sense to test more and more at lower levels, but it doesn't make sense to do that for a company that hasn't even proven its value yet. So it's enabled us to be confident and yet not go deep.
That's awesome. So what else should we cover? I mean, one thing that'd be interesting is if you could just show the app, but I don't know if there's things you guys would like to other things we should mention, or did Earthly solve your problem? Do you have advice for people considering it? General thoughts you just want to throw out there?
Earthly has solved my dependable CI problem and the problem of reproducing what's running in CI locally, and drastically decrease the onboarding time for a new machine. And I think even made it so that I can upgrade Ruby without even talking about it, because people just get the new one. It's been great. I look forward to keeping using it.
How about you, Jordan? Like you didn't choose Earthly.
Yeah, I think to be honest with you, when we first started, I was kind of like, what is this thing that is like kind of in my way, of like my normal workflows, right? It definitely, I think, anytime you have a new tool, there's times learning a tool and there's where you're maybe not. And I have to say that like once I did start to actually engage with it, I was like, oh, this is actually really great.
Nice.
It took
We'll
like,
take it.
it took like one moment, of getting, like, oh, I have to get invited to some org and, I have to click some button somewhere, but that's the pain, like that's manageable. So yeah, once we were able to, to actually start using it and also to bring in people for even short periods of time to help out with this or that, and to just give them a couple of commands to run and have the whole thing running on their system. And we're confident that it's using, the same stack. So valuable.
That's awesome. Well, thank you very much, guys. This has been super valuable. I think somebody looking at Earthly will really benefit from seeing what you guys do.
Sounds
Yeah.
good.
If you have any other folks who's trying to spin up similar big Rails stacks, feel free to point them our direction and we can collaborate.
Yeah.